All right, so we're going to be evaluating our property. We're going to be looking at what it could be with vision and a realistic expectation of the time and money necessary to get it done, with an understanding that if we're doing it remotely, we're going to have to put multipliers on that of probably at least 20% in time and cost, at least. Okay, and the realization that things we could do for ourselves, we may need to contract out just to get it done in a reasonable amount of time, because it's not like something you can just come home from work and work on. When we moved into one property, it needed a lot of work, and we just stripped the floor in the kitchen and started laying new tile. And we just didn't have a kitchen for a week, but it got done a couple hours a day until it was done. You can't generally do that with a bug out location. But we also need to remember what I said about you're looking for that property that could easily be better, but the guy can't do it, won't do it, it's too dumb to do it, doesn't have the money to do it, it's up against a bind, can't do it, so it doesn't display well, doesn't show well. It's difficult for him to get an offer for the price he's asking, so we can pay less for it. And what we want to do then is we want to ignore stupid shit that's easy to fix. Just like it's not even, just assume it was there. What would the property be worth then? Now we'll go back and figure out, well, okay, the paint in this place sucks, but that I could do. I could come down here in a weekend and paint 2 rooms, and the next weekend paint 2 rooms. So I could paint this shit, and it's $500 worth of paint. You can estimate that real easy and say, okay, I'm just going to ignore that. That's $500. And drinking some beer and painting and listening to music in my new place. And I get to make it the color I want. In fact, let me put it this way. If you want a textbook way to think about real estate and not worry about stupid shit, watch shows like House Hunters and Beachfront Bargain Hunt and all that stuff where these families go out, we're going to find a house, okay? Watch those people, and 90% of what they bitch about is exactly what you should be ignoring. And if you do that, you'll make smart decisions. People bitch about the stupid shit that doesn't matter, but that's why those properties don't sell for the asking price, and that's your opportunity to pick them up at a discount, especially if you can be a cold-hearted asshole for one transaction. You can go back to being the dolphin-hugging, orphan flower-giving, savior of humanity the day after you close, but you got to be a tough son of a bitch when you're dealing with real estate for that one day. Ignore repairs that are easy to do. Ignore clutter, right? Well, look at all this junk laying here. Hey, as long as the guy's willing to get it out of here as part of the contract, you don't give a shit. But there's clutter all, real estate agent, there's clutter all over the countertops. Make no mistake, when you're showing your home, declutter your countertops. But when I'm a buyer, I don't give a shit. I don't care. Doesn't bother me at all. You know, it doesn't even remotely enter my head that I want to know what the countertop looks like on it. I'm not going to need to replace that, and what's it going to cost me? Think that way. You make smart decisions. And this is like the big one. It's probably the 1% where you can break this rule, but 99% follow it. Never waive inspection and appraisal. If you're in a situation with heavy cash where you're not financing it, what have you, a lot of times what people do in hot real estate markets or whatever is they'll come in. We sold my father-in-law's house this way. I'll do it as a seller. I'm not doing it as a buyer. Guy came in, looked at the house, said, we'll give you $105,000. We'll waive inspection, we'll waive appraisal, and we're paying all cash. You, sir, bought a house. We had multiple. That was a situation where it really was like that for a unique thing that has nothing to do with this, so I won't explain it. But there were multiple offers. Several were cash. And the guy that waived the inspection and the appraisal was the guy that we just said yes to. Now, he wanted a basic inspection, not a full inspection. Like, he wanted to be able to take a day himself and look for repairs that were necessary. That was his inspection. He was going to do it himself. So he came back with about $1,000 worth of shit that he said needed to be fixed. He was right. We took $1,000 off the property, and he had his house. I would never do that as a buyer because there could be structural issues with a property that you don't know about. And you're giving up a primary leverage tool. Once that inspection's done, you have an offer to go back in good faith and negotiate with your seller and say, hey, all this stuff needs to be done. By the way, if you do get another person interested in this property, this is still going to be here, and they're probably going to want an inspection too. So why don't we come to an agreement? So that's a big one. Now, the appraisal, when someone's afraid of appraisals, there's a reason. You know, it's expensive. It's about $500. It's not expensive when you're buying a $100,000 or more property. It's a tiny piece of the whole. Appraisals, really, the reason people don't want appraisals is because they know they've overpriced the property, and they know once it appraises, you got that appraiser's knife. That's what I call it, the appraiser's knife. When you are a buyer The appraiser's knife is gold. It's gold. Because you've already made an offer. Before the appraisal happens, you've made an offer, you've tendered some capital, some cash, some earnest money they call it, $1,000, $500, that goes in and just kind of sits in a little bucket that shows you're serious. The appraisal is ordered. Your mortgage company is going to look at the appraisal and go, okay, it appraised at or above what we're being asked to finance. Rubber stamp it at that point you're good to go. Let's say you come in and you offer $200,000 on a property. The appraiser comes in and says it's worth $250,000. It's not like they can come back to you and say, we want $50,000 more dollars. Sorry, you underpriced your property. Doesn't matter. And at that point, deal's done. But if you offer $250,000 and the appraisal comes in at $200,000, it doesn't work the same way. Because you can legitimately walk away from the deal and get your earnest money back because you now cannot get financing on the property because they overpriced it. Now you can negotiate from a position of strength. Why would you ever give that up? Don't give up those two things. Unless you're in a situation where you got to have the property, it ticks every box, and you really know what you're doing. So in other words, don't do it. Again, 99% of the time. And remember, this is a bug out location. You're not looking for a house to live in. So if you have to wait a little bit longer to find the right one, you wait a little bit longer to find the right one. It's not like you're selling your house, you got to get a new house, you move to a new city, whatever. You have time. Use time to your advantage. Commander Spock, not Dr. Spock. Logic, not freaking feelings. But I love it. You'll love something else someday too, when it makes sense financially. Okay, I can't say that enough. Next, let's talk about security. Now I know what you're thinking. Oh, we're going to get into it now. We're going to get some concertina wire, and we'll get some booby traps, and we're going to get some surveillance equipment, and some night vision, and when them blue helmets come, I'm going to be ready. Okay, you need to go find Alex Jones or some shit like that. I'm actually talking about reality here. And what I'm going to say is, if you move to a place like that because the shit has hit the fan, your preparedness mindset and your equipment, etc., your prep should all be geared towards security as one of your 5 primary survival needs, and I actually call it 6. Food, water, shelter, energy, security, health, and sanitation I put together as the 6th. Right? So security is big, and it's the most important one because it's the one you can live the least amount of time without when you need it. In other words, if you don't have water for a day, you're going to be okay as long as you get water at the end of the day. And you're going to need water every day, right? So it's a constant need. So you don't get to a false sense of security about water or food because you have that daily requirement. Security, you can get lulled into a false sense of because what happens is you can go your whole life without any adequate security whatsoever, and you can be okay. I know it doesn't make sense, but you really can. People do it all the time. They're clueless, and they're lucky. But if you need security for 1 second when it counts and you don't have it in that 1 second, you can be dead. So security is paramount, especially in a shit hit the fan. But that's up on the shelf with the bug out location concept for a minute. This is a remote property. You're not going to be there. Forget the shit hit the fan. What about today, tomorrow, and next week? We had a remote property in Arkansas. I actually rented it to my niece for a while because they needed a place. And we took all of our preps, and it was a mobile home, and so we put it underneath the house. So when they moved out, there was literally nothing there. It just so happened that in that little window before we kind of set it back up for ourselves, there was like a couch and some other crap, but it wasn't anything worth any money. No TVs, no electronics, and nothing obvious. It was just like an old piece of crap refrigerator. It was probably worth not enough money to make it worth pulling out of the place and what have you. So several houses in that community, apparently people had been watching, and when everybody was gone, they went in there and broke into them. They broke into our house and took nothing because we got lucky, and our stuff was hidden. And the neighbors went up on security, like the next day. Like the guy went out and got 2 German Shepherds, another guy got involved, and that actually made the whole neighborhood really secure, so you may not want to be by yourself. That made our property secure when we weren't there, and we felt comfortable kind of putting it back to a point where it was like a vacation home again, unless we needed it for a bug out location. But what if all of our preps had been in a closet? They would have been stolen. Then when we needed them in a shit hit the fan, if that had ever happened, they wouldn't have been there. So it's not just the cost, it's when we need them, they're not there. So you have to think about security in the good times. Because in the bad time that you're there, you can see to your security. It's when you're gone that you're at most vulnerable risk for security violations. So This is a real weakness for the very remote property. That little cabin out in the middle of the woods that's so awesome, there's nobody around for miles. Sooner or later, locals are going to find it and realize that it's empty, and scumbags are going to come steal. Gates are great, but this is my view about gates. Gates keep honest people out. Gates keep honest people out. They make dishonest people think, but they'll still cross the gate. But at least they know, okay, now I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I hope no one's here. Signs work better in conjunction with gates on dishonest people than gates alone. Signs that are typical, no trespassing signs and stuff like that you get in a store, those can work. But let me tell you about a couple different signs that I've seen work really well. One was a hand-painted, poorly written, spray-painted sign on a piece of plywood that said keep out or else, and I don't remember which word, but one of them was spelled wrong. It looked like a hick, hillbilly redneck from Arkansas where you might hear banjo music, ba-dang, dang, 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 put that sign up. I knew the guy that lived up there. He was not that guy. And every time I walked up that road to talk to him, that sign made me think, even though I knew better. What do you think it does to a stranger that sees a sign like that? Another one was a good friend of mine that had a hunting lodge that ran it from Friday to Sunday every week, and nobody was on the property from Monday through Thursday. And on his gate, he put up a sign that said, "You're not lost, you're trespassing." That sign worked really well as well because it removed the excuse, I was just lost. So that's something to definitely think about.